Well, Cathy, welcome to New Zealand. Not too jet lagged, I hope.
Thank you. Yeah, not too bad. If I doze off in the middle, forgive me.
We'll wake you up. We'll wake you up. I mean, your latest book, Once in a Lifetime, is why you're here. But there's so much more to talk to you about. But let's deal with the book first. It's a very real book. The people in it are very well fleshed out.
Thank you. It's the nicest thing you can say to a writer.
Are they based on people that you know? Because they have that feeling of real people rather than made-up ones.
No, and I actually never use real people. I just don't think that works. I know some writers do, and I find that absolutely fascinating. But it would be like if I took you and I'd met you and then I put you in a book, and I changed your name to say John. The John in the book would always be you, would always want to do what you would want to do, and it just wouldn't work. It doesn't make sense. I think you've got to make them up. But the hardest part of writing a book for me is creating the characters, and that takes the longest time. That takes months and months to nail them, hammer them in, sort of chisel away at them, and then finally, once I have the people, then I can whiz along. That's how it works.
One of the nice things, though, is that these aren't people in the first flush of youth. The two of the main characters, Ingrid and David, are older. They're in their 50s and 60s in the middle of the book, and that's so unusual. You suddenly realise that the world is full of literary young people.
But you know what it is? I mean, I was talking to someone about International Women's Day recently, and I was talking about age and age and thinness and all these images that are being put up to women particularly, and it's about you've got to be young and you've got to be skinny, and I'm going, that's actually not real. There are lots of young skinny people out there, but there are lots of older non-skinny people, younger non-skinny people. So I was writing about real people. I'm 42 now, and I suppose I'm more interested in ageing now, and the idea that we're interesting as we get older. We've learned so much, and maybe we've a few wrinkles, but so what? So it's great fun writing about people of all ages. And age was an important thing in this, in that Ingrid, one of the main characters, she's on TV and she presents a political TV programme, and she's in her 50s, and actually the chances of that happening, if realistically I suppose, most TV programmes, women, they're on the way out when they're in their 50s, very much so. So she gets away with it because she's in, it's a political programme. I pick something that grabs me, and then I get really into it and obsessive and mad. And
let's talk a bit about some of the other things you did, because as if writing wasn't enough, you're also a UNICEF ambassador. So what does that actually mean?
I've always been very interested in the developing world, and when I worked in journalism I interviewed a lot of people involved in it, and I always felt very passionate about helping other people. Even in my journalism, I think I wrote a lot about child abuse and poverty and prostitution. I was interested in people, and I got involved in UNICEF. UNICEF Ireland were doing a book with celebrity Irish families, and they took a picture of you, and they were going to produce this book to raise funds for global parenting, which is a part of the charity which deals with children who are orphaned by HIV/AIDS. And I was just so involved in this, and we did, myself and my partner John did everything we could to help them. And I just said, is there anything else I can do? And they said, would you come on board? And it's just the greatest gift. I mean, celebrity is such a load of rubbish on so many levels. To be able to do something with it, because everywhere I go now, I talk about UNICEF, and I now talk about another charity I'm involved with, Chernobyl. But to give something back, I mean, when you die, you'd like to think you've done something else. So now I travel with UNICEF. I've been to Mozambique, and I went to Rwanda most recently. And you just see everything that UNICEF does. And I come back and I write articles about it, and I go and I talk about it in everything, and I give talks in schools just to tell people what's out there.
It's emotionally tough, though, isn't it, to go to somewhere like Africa with where you see kids whose parents have been wiped out by AIDS.
Oh, it's just horrific. I mean, there's a whole generation, basically, of people in their 30s and 40s who have died. I mean, it is a pandemic, and you've got small children being raised by grandparents, and these people, they have nothing. I mean, they're living in, if they have a little house that has a floor that's made of concrete, they're wealthy. Otherwise, they have little floors made out of earth and, corrugated roofs. They're lucky. And these kids, once the parents die, I mean, there's no social services, there's nothing. Once the parents die, they're vulnerable to everything, from malnutrition to not going to school to every sort of physical and sexual abuse. So what we try and do, I mean, UNICEF, it's like a ballet. There's so many parts to it, there's food, there's health, education. I mean, that's a massive thing. You know, in our world, education is where you go to learn. In Africa, school is like a safe place. It's a place where you learn to get out of poverty. It's where you learn how not to be abused. It's where there are adults that you can trust. It's so powerful. And I go there and I see kids who you want to love them and mind them and bring them home. And I think of my own 2 beautiful little children at home, and I think, you know, I've got to do something.
Yeah.
You know?
Which brings us on to the other charity you're involved with, the children of Chernobyl.
That's, you know, the woman who set that up, it really proved that one person can change the world. And Adi Roach, one person, saw what had happened in Chernobyl when the disaster happened 21 years ago. And she saw children being born with these horrific diseases. And she said, I'm going to do something. And what she does is her organisation, there are a lot of children born with what they call Chernobyl heart. And it's this birth defect, and they're going to die basically by the time they reach 5 or 6, and it's all because of the radioactivity. So she raises money, brings over teams of heart surgeons every year, and they operate on children, and they leave the equipment behind, the medical equipment. They train the local doctors how to do the surgery, and it's just incredible. But, you know, these are in Belarus. She's also working in Ukraine now, which is a very difficult political place to work in. She talked to me the last time I met her, the time she got me on board. She was telling me about going into a hospital in Ukraine, and there was an operating theatre with a tiny chair and with little restraints on it, and it was for surgery on small children where they didn't have a child anaesthetic machine, and they used the adult ones in absolute emergencies, but they used to tie children down for things like tonsils. I mean, one of my children had a tonsillectomy in December, and I said, if there's anything I can ever do, so I'm going to Belarus in April to see. Just to talk. I mean, you know, we could all do something. You know, every few quid makes a difference to someone else's life.
It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in. Enjoy the rest of your trip down under. And we've enjoyed your book. Thank you very much.